So I'm at the 2 year mark for my Achilles rupture, and like I said, I was going to do a bit of an update video. In previous videos, I've covered so much of my actual Achilles rupture journey. I vlogged the first 3 months, giving lots of advice, and I've then done an 18-month update where I talked about the journey to that point. I don't want to repeat a lot of that in this video, so what this video really is going to be about is giving you a bit of an update at the 2 year mark of what my Achilles and calf muscle, more importantly, looks like, and talking you through what I found to be the most impactful part of my rehab journey. And because this comes much later on, this video is going to focus on all the steps that you need to take to get there. And I don't know about you, but if you're anything like me, I didn't watch any videos really after the 6 month mark, let's say, of my Achilles rupture. And for instance, I'm at the 2 year mark now and I'm not watching vlogs and information or videos on other people's journeys. I'm just taking my own. I think the most people that watch these videos are people that rupture their Achilles in the first 3 months when the uncertainty is really high and you're just trying to make yourself feel a little bit better about what the steps are going forward. And that's why I think it's really important to watch this video around then, and even if you end up watching it later, so that you know what all the good steps I took in my rehab journey were, and you can build them into your own so you have that information when you get there. A key aspect of rehabbing your injury and getting back to the sport or activities that you really want to do is actually just taking the time to do the boring stuff and trying to, as much as you can, keep on track with all the rehab, even though it can often be quite boring, and by no means is it perfect. It wasn't for me. I've taken breaks, I've taken weeks off, I've been traveling, I've not had the equipment I needed at certain periods of time. So look, it's not going to be ideal, but as long as you keep focused and do most of the work, I think you're going to be fine. The one thing we can't ignore in the whole rehab journey is just the power of not re-injuring yourself. If you've watched my other vlogs, I've had lots of incidences where I've almost injured myself, or I've slightly done something and had a niggle here or there. I've even almost injured my right leg getting back to sport and not remembering that my right leg has also been absent from a lot of these sports. So look, try and stay injury free. I think that has to be number one on everyone's list. But don't be too hard on yourself if you get a niggle here or there, because I have as well. And I guess it's always difficult to get the balance of pushing yourself to the right degree. In cracking on in the rest of this video, we're going to talk about where I had the biggest step up in my Achilles rehab journey, where I saw the strength gains I hadn't seen it somewhere else, and that was getting back to sport. For me, that sport was squash, but generally just other activities. The reason I think that I saw such a step change in the quality of my calf muscle and just movement and ability to do a calf raise was the amount of volume you can put into your leg and your calf and your Achilles muscle when doing a sport. That's kind of hard mentally to do, and even physically when you're in the gym. You're introducing so much variability in a sport that is hard to emulate in a gym. In the gym, we're kind of training these linear movements of a straight leg, bent leg, calf raise, and look, there's so much more variety when you start doing an activity and a sport. So for me, getting back on a squash court, playing some games, I saw really good gains in the mobility and strength and function of my left calf and Achilles, which is the one I injured. The rest of this video is going to be talking about the things I do to have gotten to that place, the warm-ups I still do, the routines in the gym that I'm still working on to keep my Achilles and calf muscle healthy and working. I'm going to show you a little bit of what my calf looks like as of the 2 year mark, and you'll realize that my left calf is still tracking behind the size of my right calf, but I'm still able to get back to all the things I wanted to do, play sports. I actually entered a squash tournament a few weeks ago and I played 3 matches in the course of one day to a really high competitive level that I'm quite used to, which was a real benefit and a real positive for me. And I hope you can take some of that away with you too. Before I flip to talking you through the video I've recorded of me in the gym doing these exercises, the one thing we have to touch on is when you get back to your activities, your sport, we can't ignore that part of the journey is of course physical, but there's a huge mental component to it. Having the confidence to push off that leg, having the confidence to even get back to your sport where you want to be engaging in more intense movements and not having to worry about that calf and Achilles. And the only thing I will say to you is just take it in small steps, incrementally increase your exposure to that sport. Watch this video, think about all the things that I did to prepare myself to even get back to starting to think about doing a sport. Make sure you prioritize your warm-ups before you start engaging in any of these sports going forward. And ultimately try to avoid injury. And the way you can do that is by getting back to sport in a small steps. One thing I found really useful was to actually time how long I was going to spend on a squash court. Initially, I didn't want to spend more than 40 minutes on a squash court, and thankfully the bookings for squash courts are around 40 minutes in the UK. And then eventually I was on there for about an hour. There was occasions where I forgot, I was enjoying myself and I overplayed. I went over the time I was meant to play, and I felt a few niggles, and it didn't feel as good the next day. Also, the one kind of hot tip that I want to give you actually is footwear. So the one thing that I found, I think when I injured my left Achilles in the first place, and the other day when I was playing squash on my right leg this time, I was about to finish the game, my laces were untied, and I decided not to tie them up. And in the middle of that last rally, I kind of changed direction and I felt my foot slip out of the back of the shoe. And I felt a similar strain in my calf and Achilles that I felt in my left when I snapped it in my right. Thankfully, I didn't tear it, but it did feel a bit sore. So I just want to emphasize, make sure you get a shoe that fits really well. The one thing I found in the pair that I tore my left Achilles in was that the padding in the rear heel of the shoe was really bad. And I used to find that they often slipped off. And I do, if I think about it, I remember my shoe partially slipping off on the day that I tore my Achilles. And as you can imagine, if the shoe slips off, in that brief moment, you're putting so much more load through the calf and the Achilles that it may not be able to cope that quickly. And that's maybe why it tore that day. That's probably why I had a similar sort of injury on my right when the shoe slipped off. So get a good fitting shoe, something that, especially if you're changing directions in something like a sport like squash, you have that cushioning in the heel, especially at the lip of the heel, to keep your foot in the shoe. When you're doing something like running, which is a lot more predictable, I think there's less risk of something like that. But where you're doing something explosive and something where you're changing directions, you just want a good shoe that fits well and isn't going to slip off. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to talk you through all the good things and some video footage I've recorded. So warm up, exercises in the gym, and the fundamentals of that progressive journey to get back to a sport. I'm going to show you what my calf and Achilles look like as of today. And then I'm going to throw in a few extra bits around a rehab exercise I learned that's really useful, and see some other videos I've kind of recorded and see if they're of any value to you. So when you're getting and progressing far enough along your rehab journey, you're going to have to start doing a really good warm-up before you engage in kind of more strenuous sports or maybe more strenuous rehab elements of your journey. So the one that I've been doing, which you can just repeat, it doesn't have to be sexy, it doesn't have to be new, is the one I'm about to show you. So starting with really simply just doing some leg swings. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that it's not just about the warming up your Achilles and your calf. You have to warm up all the supporting muscles too. When you're doing an activity or exercise or loading weight, you're trying to spread that weight over a number of different muscles so that you can distribute it and you're not overloading any one muscle, tendon, etc. So when you're doing your leg swings, initially I'm doing it just to warm up my legs without too much emphasis on my calf and on my Achilles. But you're going to see shortly that I start doing a heel lift. So you're going to see, as you can see, I start doing a bit of a heel raise. And this is at the point in my rehab journey where I'm able to do one nicely or with body weight. And we just continue. There's a little bit of an exercise to really open up the full body where I am doing a toe tap, which you can throw in. Of course, don't forget to do the other side. So leg swings with the calf raise added. Then you can do your toe taps. We started doing these side on, and then you can do them front on facing a wall. Again, same thing, you're just repeating the leg opener to the side, and then you're throwing in a nice heel raise to start warming up that Achilles and calf muscle. You can then do something really isolated in terms of actually just doing a calf and Achilles raise. I like to do this with my knee pulled into my chest because it starts to activate my core as well and starts to engage the upper body when I'm trying to activate the lower body. And I think that's one thing really important to think about, not just in your warm-up, but when you're doing your rehab journey in the gym. And there's kind of two ways of thinking about your rehab. There's a way of isolating just your calf and Achilles muscle. And then there's this kind of element or idea of switching on all supporting muscles and really tensing all of them and working all your muscles. And they somehow give you a bit of an extra push in the muscle that you're trying to work. I then, of course, specific to my sport, but doesn't mean you can't do it if you're not playing squash, is just start throwing in some lunges. And my lunges get progressively deeper and deeper. So what I'm trying to do is just test how my legs feel. And if they feel good, I'm getting into a bigger lunge. My knee might go further past my toes, which means my Achilles on a bit more of a stretch. And I'm just getting a feel, getting my heart rate going up, getting some blood flowing in my quads and all the movements I'm about to engage in. I then do something quite specific with a racket where I'm lunging into the corners. You can do something like that, or just throw in something like this, which is me running backwards, then forwards and side to side. So I'm just including and starting to get some variability into my feet and my legs and get my heart rate up so the blood's flowing, so I can really give my rehab or my sport everything. Of course, you can just jump on a bike and use that as your warm-up to get your blood flow going, but you probably want to do something specific to your legs and your ankles and your calf and Achilles, of course. So look guys, it's as simple as that as a warm-up. I do that warm-up before I play squash. My warm-up is about 10 minutes, I would say. And look, prioritize it even more on the days you're feeling late. There's no need to jump on court, and just think about the cost of injuring yourself again just to make sure you start a sport or not to annoy someone that you're slightly late. Look, do your warm-ups. They're going to serve you well. Like I said, I've got back to squash. I've moved from 40 minutes to 1 hour to playing in an A-graded tournament. Get your warm-ups in so you can get yourself in a condition to get back to your sport. We're going to talk through movements, and the really useful thing about Achilles rehab in this case is that you're fundamentally going to do 3 exercises from now and into the future, which is a straight leg calf raise and a bent leg calf raise. And you can use the equipment that I'm about to show you now, which is leg press, to do a straight leg calf raise. I like the leg press machine where you're sitting horizontal. You get other ones where you're kind of sitting at an angle and the weight is coming down at you. What I found in my own journey was that sometimes the plate that you put your foot on is way too heavy, and even without any weight, you can't engage in any calf raise. That's not to say it's not any good. You can do an isometric. So let me just talk you through on the leg press machine. I start off with, and there's kind of the standard exercises. So if we talk through them, you've got your double leg, and I think the reason and the value in using a double leg is that you can get the full range of motion on your uninjured leg, and your injured leg can start to replicate that. And you can use your stronger leg to help with the load. And I find with this, your injured leg is kind of at your maximum working level if you get the weight right. So you're really, really pushing it. And I think a double leg is really good, even though isolated single legs will highlight a big difference. I think a warm-up set with a double leg is really, really valuable. You'll also see I take my feet down to neutral in this example. I'm not letting my heels go below the platform. That's a safer position to be in the early part of your rehab, and then future you can go into a bit more of a stretch where your kind of heels drop even further, your toes are above your heels effectively, and you've got a stretch going through that calf muscle, which is really important for developing the strength in that muscle. But at the beginning, you may want to stay out of that stretch. Obviously, you've got your isometrics where you're pushing at different levels. It could be at the top range of that calf raise, could be at the neutral stance, it could be at the bottom end, and nothing's moving because it's just heavy. That's what an isometric is. Of course, you've got variations of that on your single legs. You can use your double leg to get to the height of calf raise and then eccentrically lower yourself down, which is a really important part of the rehab journey. You have something called eccentrics where you can put more load, through your muscle, and it's easier to lower heavy weight than it is to push up on heavy weight. And as you can see, you can do all of that on double leg or single leg on leg press machine. You've then got all the same things you can just do with a bent leg. And we've talked about variations before where you can just have your feet pointed out, feet pointed in, and your feet neutrals. And you can think about that as a bit of variability. And then you're just trying to get the right amount of weight, and you're trying to get that full calf raise where you've really kind of got that knuckle and your foot moving over that knuckle and getting to the top. The height of that calf raise is really important. You can then use something like this machine, which is actually a straight leg calf raise machine, which you can load up. And you can do the same on something called a Smith's machine, where you put a platform and then you're lifting with this bar, and there's bars in this machine where it's kind of controlled so you're not going to fall over or anything like that. I've got a small part of this video where I'm stretching because look, when I was playing that tournament, there's no doubt I had a bit of thought around, is my Achilles going to get through my calf muscle? And I was just stretching after every match to make sure that all the muscles were ready to share the burden of that match, not just my calf and Achilles. And look, I got through it during the match. The good thing is that you're never really thinking about the calf or Achilles. You get to forget about it because someone's sending you into another corner and hopefully you're doing the same to them. But that was all good. Then I just wanted to show you what I've been able to achieve, just some basic compound movement. So my deadlift, I'm deadlifting about 130 kg here. Obviously my calf is not going through a calf raise, but I'm pushing my feet really strongly through that floor in order to do this. And when I'm taking steps off with that weight, I tell you, I can feel it in my calf and Achilles. So I just wanted to show you a few things I'm able to do. And then squatting, I think the squat was about 100 kg. You will see from the side view that my knees are passing my toes. And that's putting a bit of a stretch on that Achilles and the calf muscle. And look, part of the rehab journey is getting back to these movements, because you essentially, when you're 3 months out, not doing any of these things, all the muscles, including the muscles required to squat in your quads, your glutes, your hamstrings, all of them need to slowly get back to doing the work. One thing I thought I'd quickly show you is actually in the future, I'm trying to get back to a bit of explosive training, and I thought I'd introduce sprinting. Sprinting is not something I've done before, so I'm going to start doing that to see if that helps and offers any value to my left Achilles, and just keeping power and explosiveness in my lower body going forward. Let's do what you're all kind of waiting to see and look at my calf and Achilles. I took a video when I was actually shopping at Nike in London, and look, you can see from the light above the real distinction between my right and left Achilles. There's still a difference. You can see it, and it's a bit more prominent when the lighting is a bit more open. You can see my right leg is bigger than my left. In all honesty, when I've asked people, not many people notice or even able to tell the difference until I flex or try and show them, at which point they can see it if they focus on it. So that's that. Look, one exercise that I wanted to talk you through that I learned recently when I went to physio was this kind of walking, slapping down of the foot. So what you're meant to do is lift your toes as high as you can, and when you put that foot down, you kind of slap it down. You want to hear this slapping sound, this explosive kind of sound on the ground when you engage that foot. You can see I'm doing it with some weights. You can do it walking forwards, you can do it walking sideways. So I've got a couple of views for you here to have a look at. But in all honesty, I really like this exercise, and I wanted to show it to you because it felt like it was lighting up my calf and Achilles in a way that other exercises perhaps weren't doing. So I'm going to try and throw that in. It's a new one for me, and I actually struggle to remember it because it's so new to do it. But that's a nice one. I hope you guys get some value from. I wanted to actually mention a couple of things I find useful, and this is not directly related to my calf and Achilles, and I can't tell you that I use these things every day and they're really important. But at the end of the day, once we start looking at the holistic view, we want to have stronger feet so they support and ground us when we're trying to use our calf and Achilles. And a few things, I've had these, I've not bought them specifically because of this. I work part-time as a PT. I'm not necessarily saying you need to buy it, but I really like this Mobo board because it helps me to engage the feet and my arches of my feet and try and strengthen them up, being someone who is slightly or maybe even significantly flat-footed, I find it really useful, and I find by strengthening the feet I'll have more access to use my calf and Achilles, because in some instances I find it really hard to do a calf raise on my left leg, and sometimes I feel like it's the foot that isn't strong enough to get me into that position to finally roll over that big knuckle. We've got this other board called a black board, which is trying to do something similar, but it's going about it in a slightly different way, a different system. We're trying to balance and activate that foot, and I think both are good. I bought the black board so I can use it when I was traveling, and I have to say I don't use any of these items as much as I should, so it's just one of those things, but you may find it useful. The thing I think is really directly applicable is this, which is called I think it's called the Toe Pro, but I will link in the notes so that you can find it. And look, it helps you to kind of get that thing that I was struggling with, which is getting the weight over the front toes and finally getting to get your foot to roll over that front knuckle. So you get that final portion of that heel raise, and it gives your feet some support. I put a lacrosse ball in between my heels just because it's a quality calf raise and less compensations that way. I've been told to do this by someone who I used to train, was getting some coaching from in terms of gait analysis a few years ago. So kind of continued to use that technique, which I find really useful. So that's been quite a useful thing for me to use. Finally, I wanted to show you, and my journey going forward really is going to be about trying to get some more volume into my left calf, because as we know, hypertrophy is just high volume, high reps, which I think sport is providing. So I'm not sure how much more volume I'm going to get there. But I'm going to use these things, which are compression bands, which effectively restrict, the blood flow restriction bands are actually called. They restrict the blood flow in your legs. What it means is that you can train lighter because you're creating some stress by reducing the blood in that leg. So you don't use as heavy weights, which means you might be able to do more repetitions. With more repetitions, I may get increased hypertrophy. And it's also supposed to reduce the amount of work or recovery work you have to do. And the equivalent of, and meant to be the equivalent of lifting and doing harder work apparently. So I'm going to try those to see how things go. But that's me walking high toe, and of course doing a bit of a skip there for you at the end and simulating, you know, that toes out, toes in, toes neutral kind of movement. But skipping's really good. I've covered it in another video in the past. That is, you know, kind of first steps into introducing explosive plyometric type of movement into your lower body to make sure you're ready for explosive sports. That's everything I had in mind for this video. My Achilles and calf journey continues. Continue to look after it, just like every other muscle. Continue to develop it and make it even better through my gym and training journey. Look, there's going to be more on calf and Achilles in my journey going forward, I'm sure, so you'll see those as and when they come up. I hope you found it useful, and I guess I shall see you in future videos.